The Curious Case of Professor Paws. Once upon a time in the quaint neighborhood of Meadowbrook, a renowned detective named Professor Paws was prowling the streets, accompanied by his loyal sidekick, Fluffy. Professor Paws was not your ordinary detective. In fact, he was a brilliant feline with a reputation for solving the most perplexing mysteries that had the human detectives scratching their heads in confusion. One sunny morning, as Professor Paws and Fluffy strolled through the neighborhood, they noticed a commotion near the local bakery. Curiosity piqued, they sauntered over to investigate. The townsfolk were gathered around, whispering anxiously about a series of peculiar events that had been unfolding.
The first incident involved Mrs. Whiska's prized fish vanishing from her kitchen while she brewed a pot of tea. Then, the town's beloved mail carrier, Mr. Snuggles, had reported his bag of letters mysteriously disappearing from his bicycle basket. And if that wasn't enough, the local library had discovered that books were inexplicably rearranged every night, leaving the librarians baffled.
Professor Paws knew that something extraordinary was afoot, and he wasted no time in putting his exceptional detective skills to work. Fluffy, his trusty sidekick, with eyes as sharp as a hawk, was always by his side, ready to lend a paw whenever needed.
They began their investigation by interviewing the victims. Mrs. Whiskers described how her fish seemed to vanish into thin air while her back was turned. Mr. Snuggles mentioned that he felt a strange draft on his neck moments before the letters vanished from his basket. The librarians recounted eerie whispers and a faint scent of lavender wafting through the stacks as they discovered the books rearranged.
Professor Paws analyzed the clues meticulously, pondering the significance of each detail. As he reviewed the evidence, he couldn't help but notice a recurring pattern. Lavender fragrance was present at each crime scene, leading him to suspect a common link among the strange occurrences. With Fluffy at his side, Professor Paws embarked on a neighborhood expedition, searching for any signs that could shed light on the mystery. They combed through gardens, back alleys, and the local park. It was in the park, hidden beneath a bush, that Fluffy discovered a small purple feather, identical to the ones used in fancy hats. The duo knew they were on the right track.
Their journey led them to a quaint old house with a charming garden. The house belonged to a reclusive widow, Mrs. Whiskerton. She was known for her love of fancy hats, always adorned with delicate feathers. Professor Paws and Fluffy knocked on the door, hoping to unravel the mystery that had consumed their neighborhood.
Mrs. Whiskerton greeted them with a cautious smile. Her eyes widened as Professor Paws presented the purple feather. Sensing she had been caught, Mrs. Whiskerton confessed that she had been pulling off these peculiar acts out of sheer boredom. She craved excitement in her life and wanted to see how the town would react. Professor Paws, being a detective with a compassionate heart, understood that even the most curious cases often had underlying motives. He convinced Mrs. Whiskerton to channel her creativity into more positive endeavors, suggesting she join the local theater group where her talent for dramatic flair could be truly appreciated. As the sun began to set, Professor Paws and Fluffy returned to the town, bringing an end to the string of peculiar events. The townsfolk, relieved to have the mystery solved, celebrated Professor Paws' remarkable deduction skills. From that day forward, the neighborhood knew they could count on the brilliant feline detective to solve any curious case that crossed his path. And so, the legend of Professor Paws and his trusty sidekick, Fluffy, continued to grow, leaving a lasting impression on Meadowbrook, where mysteries would always be solved, and justice would always prevail.